Okay, we're recording. Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. We're having our first meeting of 2025 in the afternoon. We got a good program today, so I hope you all enjoy it. Can you all hear me back there?
Not yet, working on it. They shut up.
Huh?
They shut up. I don't.
Oh. Yeah, if I turn it on, it always helps. Hey, how's that? How's that? Okay, well, as always, I want to thank Texas Western for letting us meet here. And David, do you have any announcements or anything like that?
Thank you, Dick. First of all, as always, welcome out to the Texas Western. Anybody here new for the first time? Everybody's old hands. Again, welcome. Please take a tour of the layout after the meeting so you can see all the new things that are going on in various places on the layout. Just this past Saturday, we had our BOD installation dinner and awards night. Just so that you will know, because these guys are members of the division, Clarence Zink was awarded Engineer of the Year. Now, that means that he has been involved in the layout, mentoring people, and has done a lot moving us toward prototypical operations by doing a lot of work on measuring track, logging in cars, working in JMRI. So Clarence got Engineer of the Year. Conductor of the Year is Daryl Cowles, who is here. Conductor of the Year is the person that has made the biggest impact on the layout. And the BOD judges that by how many comments do we get from visitors, other members of the club, division members that come in and say, woo, wow, that, make a lot of great comments. So based on comments and feedback that we got, Daryl won Conductor of the Year. We came up with a new award called Fireman of the Year. And this is for a first-year member who, instead of walking around and looking, decides to really get actively involved and make a difference. That was awarded to Tom Peppers, who is new in our club this year and also is new in the NMRA. Tom, are you here somewhere?
Yeah, he's here somewhere. I was talking to him.
He is outside smoking. Good, he took it outside. So that's the new news for our club. I hope it's interesting to you a little bit because these plaques on the wall are incentives for people to excel, do things in the club, help new members, and move our layout forward. So that's all I've got. Thank you, Dick. Great to have all of you here.
David Grine, Treasurer's Report. You're on.
I see that. Oh, all right. Okay, I won. All right, we started with a balance of $19.38.85. First of December, we had 0 receipts because we didn't bring in any money. And we had expenditures of $797.45. Our balance currently is $1,141.40. However, as of December 31st, our CD balance was $22,000.777.47. So that's the report.
Okay, thank you, David.
How do we do? Good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of revenue, don't forget to feed the pig in the back for the pizza and the coffee and the donut, or not coffee and the drinks.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Just feed, a couple of bucks for a slice. If you get a couple slices and a drink, throw in $5. We'll be good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Okay, so I'm not sure everybody knows this, but each year the division gives out awards. And we're going to pass those out today. And they're to identify, kind of like Texas Western, the awards are specifically identify people that have provided great performance and great outstanding service in the area of service, overall contribution and leadership to the division, as well as craftsmanship. The first award is the Jim Norwood Award for Member of the Year. And for decades, just to give you a little background on the award, Jim Norwood supported Division I with his participation, and he was admired by all, and his kindness helped more than just a few members. To remember Jim, we now have an award honoring the member who has shown exemplary leadership and service in the past year. And there's a lot of people that have done a lot of great work, but I think David Coranda has met that criteria more than anyone else. And David, so you're the Jim Norwood Member of the Year. Congratulations. Let's.
Photo. Thank you.
Dick, what is it he does? We don't ever see him. Well, he works behind the scenes, so to speak. Yes. Okay, and the second award is the John Garfield Volunteer Award. And you know, we all know John Garfield very well, and we understand that John has been a stalwart as far as volunteering for any project that the division needed. So it's only fitting that we name an award after him, and this award has been around for probably about 5 or 6 years. If you go to the website, you can see the number of people who've won these different awards. And this year's Volunteer of the Year is Mr. Tom Pearson. Mr. Pearson.
I was volunteering for stuff?
Yeah, you volunteer for the Play It Forward module and other
Thank you.
items.
All right.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good job, Tom.
Thank you.
Okay, the third award is the Leo Paletti Award for Craftsman of the Year. And this started in 2020. The division chose to memorialize Leo Paletti. Leo was a devout member of the Hobby Division and Club, Texas Western. Leo's craftsmanship was superior, and the list of awards garnered by his work is could fill volumes of magazines. And this year's winner is Daryl Cowles. Daryl. Daryl, congratulations.
Good, right here?
Thank you. Oh my goodness. Wow, I'm honored.
Okay, and the final award is the Director's Award for Outstanding Leadership Team Member. And this was established in 2021 to recognize a leader whose responsible performance went beyond the expectations, with results producing unique and never before contributions to the betterment of the division. And this year's winner is Jim Ogden. Jim, please come forward.
I wasn't expecting this.
Congratulations.
Good.
There you go.
Good job, Jim.
Let's give everybody a big hand.
Yes.
Okay, a couple other announcements. Don't forget the Plano Train Show coming up on the 18th and 19th of January. I think you all know whether it's at the Plano Event Center. And the division, we benefit greatly from this train show. So please support it, attend it, support the vendors. It's always been a very good show. Coming up on the 25th and 26th of January is the Hobby Show in Amherst, Mass. And I don't know, is anybody going to that this year? Anybody is here in attendance? Okay, usually we have a couple people show up that go, or they end up going. Okay, and then February 15th, we got the Greater Houston Train Show, and that's on Saturday at the Pasadena Convention Center, so please support that. And of course, in June, we have the Lone Star Region Convention, and that's on the 26th through the 29th of June. Has anybody signed up for that yet? Registration is open, and they got a great lineup of clinics, and it should be a great convention. So please go to the website, sign up. I think there's a discount for early registration. Okay? Thank you very much. And I'll tell you what, now let's move into tips and tricks. Anybody got a tip or trick? Steele, come on up. Or
as all of you have probably bought over the years a freight car that was too light to track properly on your railroad. And if it is a closed car and the doors are glued shut and it's sealed up, it's very difficult to add weight to it. So I came up with an idea, and I tried it on one of those wooden refrigerator cars, and it worked fine. So I did it on this car that I won at the White Elephant in Division 3. What it is, it's one of those epoxy box cars that's totally sealed up and too light, 50-foot car. It should weigh 4.8 ounces or 4.5 ounces, and it didn't. So what I did is I popped the running board off at the end of the car where it goes over to the side ladder, drilled a hole in there, and using a rig consisting of a funnel, a customized straw, I put the straw in the hole so that, of course, it's not going to cooperate now. And then I took this liquid weight, which is tungsten BBs, and I calculated on the scale that I needed 1.5 ounces to bring it up to weight. So carefully pouring the weight into the car, I got about 3/4 ounce in this end of the car. Well, of course, if you don't do anything else, it's just going to roll back and forth. So the next step was to take a adhesive. I used Aleene's, but you can use one of the others. Nothing with a solvent in it, all water-based. And squeezed it in and then agitated it, shook it around, and eventually I didn't hear the balls rolling around anymore. So I let it sit for a day about this angle, and the next day I did the same thing to the other end, and I brought it up to weight. So that's a way you can, to bring these cars that you don't want to risk trying to pop something loose just to slide a tire weight in or something. And it works great. So there you go.
very good, Steele.
Thank you.
Harold,
I've done something similar with tank cars, which aren't very amenable to adding weight. Pull a hole in the bottom, put weight in, use a little plaster instead of adhesive, put tape across the bottom, the hole I made, put them back upright on their wheels, make sure it was level, because of course with the curve we wanted to center it all.
And did that. And the only iffy thing, and it turned out not to matter, was how much extra weight the plaster adds if you're adding water with it, but it's really negligible. And that's worked very well in tank cars. So.
okay, good.
Here to the inside.
Yeah, well, the plaster forms what's the right word? A slab, and because the tank car is shaped that way, it becomes, well, I'm not doing anything with cars other than running them, and it's going to be the full length of the car. So yeah, I am sure that if I picked it up and shook it, it would displace everything, and the adhesive might be a better way of doing that. But anyway, it works very well, and again, most of the tank cars are too light, so same deal.
David?
Does anyone use a needle and syringe to apply CA or glue to a joint? Just one person? 2 people? I have with me 200 insulin needles and syringes that I no longer need, that they come in packets of 10, You're welcome to take as many as you want. I've got 200 with me. The only thing I'd recommend is, because these syringes are plastic, don't put in any glue. If you're using a glue, put a little on a piece of plastic, whatever you put it on, and then drag the needle through it, and then apply the needle to the joint. If you're using light CA, Dr. Walter brought this to my attention, because you can also use a gel CA. If you're using a light CA, you can actually draw it up in the needle. Don't let it enter the syringe body, but you could draw some up in the needle and then apply it to your joint. So when we take our break, I'm sitting right here. Like I say, they're in packets of 10. You're welcome to take as many as you want.
Okay, thank you, David. Tom?
Well, this whole thing's a learning experience for me. And I got some great advice from one of my mentors. You know, solder my flex track before I put it in the curve to prevent kinks. And he was absolutely right. You know, because I took a picture of what I did, and what I did again after listening to him, I had no more kink. And one other thing I learned, I study a lot. I take one of my soldering station, when I'm soldering the flex track, I take 2 cotton balls, wet them, and put them on either side of the joint. And I can solder all I want and not melt the ties. So the wet things, you know, the wet cotton balls absorb the heat. So, I mean, you can do some really nice soldering and not have to worry about trashing your ties.
Very good, Tom. Thank you. Any other tips or tricks? Okay, the other thing we usually do is we talk about, is anybody having trouble with having difficulty modeling something, or something not working right on your layout, and do you need some help with something? You got a room full of about 30 experts here that are more than willing to give you a hand. And I thought, Eric, you said you had something going on, right?
Yeah, I have a question. Okay, this is for the people that have probably been in the hobby for a very long time. And I have some cars that I purchased in an eBay auction, thinking that, all right, I got 27 HO cars for $50. I thought, man, I got a good deal, okay? Well, the thing is, all of these cars are die-cast metal. I mean, these things weigh a ton. You don't need to put in any weight on them. And I mean, there's tank cars, there's cabooses, there's box cars. And I was wondering if anybody who has been in the hobby, because there's no markings on the bottom. The bottoms are actually painted in. And I know that Mantura back in the 60s made die-cast cars, but the bottom of their cars were not done. And they actually had their name on them at that time. And so if anybody can help me identify the manufacturer of these cars, I would really appreciate it. And so. Model die-cast? Okay. Jim, you wanna take a look at these and see if you?
Later after a break.
Okay.
And Jim, you think those were solid? Was that a solid car, you think?
Actually, the bodies had to be put together with our old Nemesis Walters glue.
They were flat kits.
How about Ulrich?
Ulrich is the other one I was thinking of.
Yeah, they had a lot of hoppers, Ulrich.
But these came in, they've got Katy couplers on them, they got metal wheels, and they're very heavy.
Oh, mercy sakes.
But you don't know how much of that was in the first owner's hands as opposed to the,
I don't,
yeah.
but they don't have any Mantura marks on the bottom, so.
Right, that actually may be something European, like Miraquin or Cricks.
Okay, so if anybody would come and take a look at them and see if you can help me identify who the manufacturer is, I'd really appreciate it.
If you don't want them, we'll take them off your hand.
When we all move to Mars, those will actually be better because of the lack of the lower
So,
Gravity.
gravity.
so anybody else got any other questions on their layout or problems that they would like some advice on or some help with? Okay, David.
This isn't so much a question, it's a comment on, Dick, something you said, that 30 experts in the room. If you have questions, ask. For the past couple of months, I've been working on a track plan for another module for my layout. In fact, I think I emailed it to the Cowcatcher email at one point. Taking your advice, Dick, I emailed asking for constructive criticism from Dr. Mike Walter, Dr. Mike Ross, and Ken Fitzgerald. And it was invaluable. They thought of things that I didn't think of, made a real difference in the ability to finally end up with the, excuse me, the plan the way I envisioned it, but couldn't originally put, I use any rail track planning, couldn't get it exactly the way I wanted it. So when Dick says you got 30 people in the room, don't hesitate to ask, don't wait till each meeting. Some of you have each other's emails addresses, reach out. If you want to reach out to someone who don't know their email address, contact, I guess, Dr. Ross, you're the membership chairman. He can give you someone's email address.
Yeah, or Eric can give you
Eric-
how to
Eric-
do,
Eric-
put it on Groups.io.
Right, Eric can do it as well. It makes a real difference in accomplishing what it is you're trying to do. And again, I just wanted to thank Mike Ross, Mike Walter, and Ken Fitzgerald for their invaluable help in getting it done. So, thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you, David. Okay, so we've got a couple items for show and tell. Russell, you brought this bridge in. You want to talk about that? That looks pretty impressive.
Just, back in our structure room back here, there's this bridge was sitting up on a shelf. I have no idea who built it, where it came from, how old it is, or anything. But on our layout, we have cut two decks, and one deck's about right here, and my back was hurting from crawling back and forth. So I saw this little bridge. I went, you know what? I know it's not prototypical of South Dakota, but it's prototypical for the Gifford layout. So I decided to take it. It was just aluminum spray can, rattle can. So the idea was to do what I like doing more than anything else, is just junking it up and make it look like it's been around for a couple of weeks. I got about 25, 30 hours and completely repainting it. The turquoise is, if you look at it, there's about 4 different colors of turquoise on it. And as far as the rust is a combination of different colors of hobbycraft paints and little pigments. It did run when I got it. So I took all the motor mechanism apart and rebuilt it. And it's a 6-volt motor. I found that out by doing a little research. So I found me a 120 volt to 6 volt transformer. And bought a control switch, which is actually for a boat, but it says up and down on it. So that's a good switch. I can put it up, down. This will go in the fascia. This is actually crawling underneath the layout in my back, and my wife's back is probably not the best in the world. So anyway.
Do you need some help with something, like holding a bridge or something?
No. So if I hit the up switch, well, now it's not gonna work.
Of course.
I hear it, hang on.
How many of us have completed a project and when we went to show it to have
Oh,
somebody
wire
that
came
works,
loose, that's why.
it doesn't,
All of us.
works at home.
Wire broke.
Better hurry up, there's a freighter within a few hundred yards of your bridge.
Look at that.
Always got a wire breakage, you know, it's always something.
Now that you got it all fixed, can we ask you for more money?
Sure, you can ask all you want.
Really, really.
Takes about 30 seconds, 40 seconds for it to cycle up. I won't run it all the way up, but it will come all the way up to the vertical.
If y'all wanna look at one of those real close, there's one in Houston that is now part of a walking trail, and you can examine it, touch it, anything you want to. That's really nice.
Very nice, Russell.
Level paint job.
Yeah, talk about the paint job a little bit more and how you weathered it.
Well, I'm actually gonna be teaching a clinic Saturday at the train show at 1 o'clock to show how to do basic rusting and what have you. The first thing I did a little research on looking at bridges, how they rust, where they patch at, where they do this, where they do that. And in the typical places where you're gonna find rust. So I'll start off dark to light. So I'll start off with, I use a color called asphaltium. And I'll hit all the areas that I think would be like the heaviest, the oldest rust. And that process took honestly about 10 hours. Just kind of going through it, hit these spots and make sure I catch everything. Then I'll come back and I'll use, like raw umber would be the next color I would use, and start hitting some highlighted areas and center spots where I think a little bit newer, fresher rust would be. Then I come back with these raw umber, even there's the color, I can't remember all the colors, I just know what they look like in my eyes. And then I come back and hit more spots that way. And then once I kind of get it where I want it, I take pigment powders and a little bit of alcohol. Some of it's dry. I'll start off with it dry. You can see like where I hit the tops of everything where a lot of the rust would be at. Now the rust on the bottom is a little bit darker because it's going to be down. You won't have as much fresh rust that way. But if you look across the beam work, unfortunately I put a lot of hours in these beams. When you lay the track on it, you can't see it, but I know it's there. But just doing the streaking and running, and then the engine, the hoist house was really at pieces, so I had to build a new roof for it. One thing I noticed too, that the motor runs a little warm. So I added ventilation, did put glass in it, and I put ventilation at the top to let some heat. And in the very back, I just took screen wire and just made an open there so it get plenty of air to it. If you build one of these bridges, there is a ton of gear work that goes in it. It's gotta be dead on or it won't work. Took me some time to get things realigned to where I wanted them to work at. But then I also run across a problem where I had a little bit too much paint on these gear rails, so I had to clean them off. And then I added a fair amount of label grease to everything so it works pretty smooth. But it was a fun, the deal is this, I'm working on a building for the convention and I needed a break. So I did this for a break. This is a lot easier.
That's a hell of a break.
Well, the building I'm doing all 2x4 framing and all that. I needed to put it to the side because I was going crazy. But this is fun for me. So anyway, on the clinic, it was 1 o'clock Saturday. I'm gonna have this bridge here. I'm gonna bring some of my structures that I've rusted up. I've done the clinic here for the Texas Western. We're actually able to do signs and siding, corrugated metal, anything you want rusted. I got a car that I did, one of those little bottle car kits you buy. Can't think of the brand name right now.
Just Plug?
Huh?
Just Plug? The Just Plug things?
Nah,
Jordan?
Is it metal or
Sylvan?
epoxy?
no, hang on a second.
No, Sylvan makes epoxy.
Get my blind eyes here working. I wonder where it's at. Highway miniatures. I mean, I can show you a picture of it if you can zoom in on this or not. This is a 40 model Ford. It's got full interior and it's got a flathead in it. It's very detailed out. This is gonna go in a rural repair shop that I'm doing on the competition model. But I'll have this there and a few other things. So it's really not hard, guys. It's really not. It's just time consuming. And then look at something that's rusted. I'll have a whole bunch of slides showing different kinds of rust and whatnot. Because I was telling my wife this morning that building a structure that's like brand new is hard enough, but to make it look like crap's even harder, which makes no sense. But anyway, that's this little bridge. If you got any questions, I'll gladly help you. Yes, sir.
So is there any material in the counterweight?
Yes, there's lead shot in here. There's about 4 ounces of lead in there. It kind of a little jumpy going down when I put the track on it, it's real smooth at that point. I've got 2 walkways that go on here and I've got the rail that goes into the center. I'm kind of waiting to put that on there when I get everything lined up and cut the layout because you'd be a 16th of an inch off and it'll derail. So when this goes in, I'll put the track on at that time. But these kits are about, it's a Walther's kit actually. They're new. I've seen them anywhere from $80 to about $120. They will come with micro switches, so it'll automatically shut off and I don't have that. The motor stalls, at that point, just turn it off. But I don't know how many hours. Is there any history on this at all, David?
Not that I'm aware of. It came off the version 1 layout over on England Drive.
So it's-
Terrible event though.
Yeah, I think it may have been in, but I don't know whether that one or the one that we got down here in Houston, was used in the old Houston Harbor area on the old layout.
Okay, that's cool. So it's got some Texas Western
One of them
history.
was donated, one of them we had put down in Houston.
Right.
I think Mike Corley put it in.
Being a member of the Texas Western, one of the cool things is there's stuff back there that they're not gonna use, you could buy it. So if that's a good enough reason to become a member, there you are. There's some great stuff back there.
Good advertisement. CJ for membership.
So anyway,
Membership's left, right? Okay, good.
if you're gonna do bridges, like I said, the other one I got is gonna be a lift out, but, our layout's not prototypical Black Hills. This is prototypical for our Black Hill layout. There's things that are similar there, but we're trying to build a layout that's unique and different. Not just, there's nothing wrong with like Texas Western. This is what it looked like in 1962. This is, our layout where it's gotta have a lot of points of interest and a little bit of things that are different, and that's the goal of that. Anyway.
Very nice. Nice job, Russell. Anybody else on show and tell? Mike Ross. Of course. Actually, we got a lot of time because we don't have the AP guys, either Dwayne or Mike here, to talk about the AP program.
Can I move this? Hesitate to touch it. I'm afraid it might just crumble. Can I move this?
Russell,
Russ, can I
can
move this?
we move the,
Don't touch that.
That's right. I said exactly what I thought.
Not like you're a surgeon.
Yeah.
Put this back on the shelf for $200.
Sure. We'll write you a check.
Okay. I'm sure you're good for it.
Brought a structure that I recently completed for a couple reasons. First of all, I want to see if anyone can identify the character at the office door. Does that look like Mike?
His mini print?
That's Mike and mini print. If Mike were here, in fact, I checked with him, he is visiting a grandchild in Tyler this weekend. If Mike were here, I could make some jokes about naming the building, but in his absence, I won't.
well, it doesn't look like Mac.
He's over here.
He's over here.
Over here, yeah, because I was gonna say, that's a skinny guy on that dock.
Well, that one's
That was
working.
like-
Yeah, nailed it.
Second reason to bring this is all the coloring, all the coloring, the windows are spray painted white, but the building and the roof and all the weathering is done with pan pastels. And Harold Berenschweig and I will be working on a clinic on the use of pan pastels. And I'll leave this up here. The texture of the pan pastels and the coloring is remarkably realistic, and you can see that the weathering has that very faint. It doesn't look as bad as that bridge, but that's wasn't the intent. Yeah. Okay.
So is the kit scratch built?
Negative. This is the Powerhouse BTS. You're all familiar with that line of kits. And the big mine on my layout is a BTS kit. This is the Powerhouse from it, and I've just repurposed it as an industry. Small factory, yeah.
Before you applied the pan pastels, did you put dull coat or something on the surfaces?
Negative. Now, because this is wood and fiberboard shingles. That's
Used brushes and sponges, that kind of
use sponges, but we'll do all that. We'll go over that. But I do, if I'm going to use pan pastels on something very shiny like plastic, I always prime it first.
Okay, very good.
Okay,
Thank you,
great.
Mike.
When are you gonna do that clinic? In the fall, probably.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay, so now we have the Deal or Dud program. And before we get started, I wanted to tell you, you're gonna get an IOU for a gift certificate, because I left the gift certificates at home this morning. So you're gonna get a box of Milk Duds with an IOU on it. So make sure you don't throw the box away. So let's set these up, and 1, 2.
Are there milk duds still in the box?
Yes, there are Milk Duds you get a Milk Dud plus an IOU, and for the real Dud program, you just get a box of Milk Duds. Which is not a bad deal either. So, who wants to pick the, Stu, you wanna grab a ticket out of there? Yeah.
All right. Looking up my sleeve. All right, turn them up, and the answer is
Okay, last three numbers are 986. 986. 986. Nobody's got that ticket number? What if it's mine? Okay, let's pick another one. 986, going once. Going twice. Gone. Pick another one, Stu.
all right.
Okay, 013. Mr. Pearson,
Yes, sir. How about number 3?
number 3. Okay,
I'll let you do the honors.
it is an IOU for $15 at Model Train Crossing.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. All right,
Okay, Stu, would you pick another one?
Yeah, all right.
The number is 000.
That'll be me. What's left?
Huh?
1, 2 blank.
1 or 2 or blank?
Oh, hell, 0, 0, 0 blank.
Okay, blank it is. a box of Milk Duds.
Yay! It's all right, you can use them for next time.
You sure? You don't want them. Okay, Stu, would you do the honors again? Oh, hey, whoa, 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 whoa. I apologize. I didn't look at the other side of the Milk Dud box. It is an IOU for 25 bucks. I'm sorry, you gave it away.
That's why I was trying to sell my ticket back there for $5. You guys are all done.
So we got a $10 gift certificate and a box of Milk Duds left. So if you would, Stu, another. Last three numbers are 991. 991. Oh, come on.
I think there was some left in there from last time.
I'm not sure. 991, going once? Going twice. Okay. Let's pick another one, Stu.
Last one. Pick one. It's not as easy as it looks. There we go, there's one.
Okay. This ticket is 996. Okay, Jay, here you go. Oh, it rattles. Checking all sides of the Milk Dud box, and it has nothing on it, so you.
I'll
can
trade
just-
with
Yeah, do that. See if you
treasurer.
did see if you did it right.
Last one.
Last one, here we go.
Last one. All right. One.
Gary?
Oops. Multiple. Yeah, they stick together, don't they?
008. Not 007, but 008.
That's a tough choice.
One better than 007.
I'll take two. I'll take two, they're small.
And there's a $10 IOU gift certificate in here for you. So I'll bring the gift certificate. Remind me who won what, and I'll bring it tomorrow, next meeting. Okay, so pizzas are due here about 12:45?
They're here.
Oh, they're here? Okay, so let's take a break. How long is your presentation?
I don't know, 30 minutes or so.
Okay, so I'll tell you what, it's 20 minutes to 1. Let's reconvene at 1 o'clock. John. John Garfield, do you have something to announce? Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay, we got a wonderful clinic today. We tried to see it back in November, but it didn't quite. We had technical issues. So Steve has graciously agreed to present it again. So I want to introduce or welcome Steve Crise and his moving big boy 4014 clinic. All yours.
Thank you.
I'm not that tall. So if any of you were here last November, we experienced a bit of a technical meltdown. And I'm glad to say it's been solved with additional RAM in the computer. So hopefully we won't have that issue today. So what this is an overview of the big boy, 4014, that visited Texas earlier, or I should say late last year, and caused a lot of frenzy around here. So I thought it'd be a good time to do this show that I prepared back in 2014. When I lived in California, I was involved a little bit with the RNLHS Rail Giants Museum, documenting it leaving their compound at the Pomona Fairgrounds. So this is a result of that 2 or 3 year effort. So next slide, please. So a couple of fast facts about the locomotive, if you don't already know. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I think the most interesting one is cost per unit. So in 1941, it's about $256,000. In 2016 dollars, that would be $4,292,855 and some change. I think, I can't say with certainty, that's close to the number it cost Union Pacific to restore it. It was probably more, but I can't get a real number out of them. If anybody knows that number, I'd sure like to know it. Next, please. This is what the Union Pacific hands out officially for to get people's mind around the idea of how big the locomotive is. You could see that for yourself, get a comparison. And maybe they need to update that airplane because there aren't too many 747s flying around anymore. Next, please. Originally, the engine, as steam locomotives generally were, they were designed to operate in a certain region. So in this case, the big boy was designed to operate between Ogden and Cheyenne, and with Green River in between. And that was specifically the territory that they were designed and operated in. And that's they spent their entire life on that line. So there was funny that a big boy ended up in Los Angeles. It never actually saw one for a couple of reasons. In the early 1920s, California and Los Angeles banned the use of coal burning engines. So over the time, the railroads converted to oil, something that seems that California has a knack for doing, banning things way in advance of everyone else. And so that's why they never came down to Southern California. There was no facility for coal refueling. Next, please. This is a photo of 4014 in Cheyenne, Wyoming in 1958, getting pretty close to the end of its lifespan. That's a photo from the archive at RNLHS, and that's the Railroad and Locomotive Historical Society, in case you're not familiar with those letters. And in this case, they have a display compound at the parking lot of the Pomona Fairgrounds Museum in Pomona, California. Next, please. Another view of 4014 by R.H. Kindig from the Denver Public Library collection. 1950, also getting very close to its end of life service. And it's carrying a reefer block here through Ozone, Wyoming. Next, please. Oh, I see. This is, it's recording my, that must be new. Anyway, this is not the 4014, this is the 4005, somewhere in Wyoming. And in this case, it has, at least at the front of the train, ice reefers that seem to favor meatpacking companies. So that's a nice shot of a set of reefers with one of the big boys. Next, please. So in order to keep these trains on schedule and on time and in fast service, they had coal refueling stations right on the main line. So it didn't have to uncouple and go to a yard and refuel and rewater and relubricate. It was done right on the main line. And over on the right side of the frame, you can see those are the coal cars that would bottom dump out and then conveyor belt up to the coaling tower. Next, please. Well, this is neither the 4014, but instead the 4020 and 4016. The interesting thing about this photo is in the gondola behind the caboose at the head end of the train, the slide noted on it that it was carrying material for the nuclear, the atomic, let's see, where is it? Oh yes, Atomic Energy Commission. And the caboose had military personnel guarding the material, but I thought it was an interesting slide because you have a steam engine carrying atomic energy material, two centuries meeting on the track there. So anyway, next please. This is what eventually replaced the big boy. There was a quest at this time in the 1950s to get beyond the 2,000 horsepower sort of ceiling that they had run into. And they were looking for a solution for single unit hauling, much like you would have with a big boy, instead of lashing up 7 or 8 Jeep 9s to do the same job. Next slide, please. And that sort of illustrates that problem here, where you see the top frame there with the EMD Jeep 30. There must be 6 or 7 of those. And at the bottom, you see, a bunch of Jeep 9s connected together, and they're both hauling a freight train, and they were looking for solutions to get past that, and that's kind of what the turbine was all about. Next, please. So how did the big boy get to Los Angeles? Well, somebody at the RNLHS came up with the idea, since they heard that they were disposing of these locomotives. Mr. Alfred E. Stoddard, president then at the RNLHS, wrote a letter to the Union Pacific, and it says in brief, the board of directors of our chapter has asked to inquire if there are any steam locomotives of the 4,000 class still available for donation. We maintain a historical display of steam locomotives in Southern California, including UP 9000, and would very much like to add one of the 4,000 class to our exhibit. The engine, certainly in a class by itself, is perhaps one of the best known of variations of articulated ever built. We are most interested in contributing to the preservation if one is available at all possible. So that was the letter that was sent, and that was sent on October 18th, 1961. And here is a letter on December 7th, very, very quick response from a railroad, if anybody ever had to deal with one. And by the way, it's all letters, no email. So here's the response from Mr. E.K. Bailey, which, if you are familiar with the Union Pacific at all, you're here, Bailey Yard, largest yard in the world. Well, that's who this is named after. Here's his response. Dear Mr. Ramsey, your letter of October 18th to Mr. Stoddard requesting donation of our 4,000 class steam engine for historical display in your exhibit park at Pomona has been referred to me for attention. This has been carefully considered by our executive department, and I'm pleased to advise you that we are agreeable to donating locomotive 4014, with the understanding that upon delivery to the nearest junction with our railroad, our responsibility will cease, and full responsibility will then rest upon your society. Next slide, please. Oh, you're on it. Thank you. Thank you. Anyway, attached are specifics of this locomotive, together with historical background. The locomotive, which is presently at Cheyenne, could be made ready for movement from that point about December 21st, depending on weather conditions, and will appreciate your advice promptly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the letter informing them that their locomotive is available. Next slide, please. This is my favorite part. This is the bill of sale and the condition of which they would receive the locomotive. And if you go to the next one, please. All right, this is one old steam locomotive, 4014 and tender, no charge. That's it. That's the bill of sale. And of course, all the concerned departments are CC'd on that email. Next, please. So at some point in time, in January, it left Cheyenne. This is a picture of it being towed in mid-train, going through Hesperia, California. Next, please. making its way through Lugo, California, which is at the kind of the top of Cajon Pass. Next, please. And here it is arriving at Colton, California, which it means that we've passed San Bernardino, and it's not quite on home rails yet, but they had to stop every now and then and make sure that the bearings were lubricated and nothing was overheating, because they towed it cold. And anybody that knows anything about steam engines knows that the lubricating system depends on steam to deliver lubrication to many parts of the locomotive. We'll get to that later, how they accomplish that, pulling it out of the park. Next, please. Coming into Bassett, where it diverges from the Southern Pacific and gets onto a Pacific Electric line to take it to its final resting place, or so we thought, in Pomona, California.
I can't see here, were the main rods taken out, removed for towing, or?
Excuse me? It was
The main rods taken off?
no,
They were,
left intact.
the cylinder cocks were left over.
Yes, absolutely. Well, they didn't expect this ever to run. So if it damaged anything, it didn't really matter. If I have time at the end, I'll tell you another interesting story about another locomotive they acquired. But anyway, next slide, please. So here it sat at its display area at the Pomona Fairgrounds, and this is a photo from 1991. And they painted the rods white, and didn't look very good. There was very little maintenance done. But the good thing about it is that, being that it was in Southern California, that made the 4014 a great candidate for being restored, because of the weather conditions and the care that they did take with the locomotive not rusting as badly as it could have been in another environment. It was the best candidate for restoration. We'll get into that a little bit later. Next, please. So here we're going to start with the ownership being returned to the Union Pacific. Next slide. Can you go back one, please? Sorry. So an interesting fact here is the Union Pacific owned the 4014 from December 7th, 1941 till December 28th, 1961. They had the engine for 20 years. It probably did about 1 million or so miles while it was in service. It sat in the park from July 8th, 1962 until July 23rd, 2013 for 51 years. So the museum had it longer than the railroad or its service. Yes, sir.
What was the RHLS, what did that stand for again?
The what? Oh, RNLHS, Railroad, Locomotive, and Historical Society. And I think they were part of the Southern California chapter. Next, please. So we're going to talk about how it got out of the fairgrounds and onto the main line. Next, please. So here's a Google Earth map, and I'm going to point, sorry for you guys that are watching at home, but if you look at the bottom of the graphic, that is where the compound is in the parking lot at the Pomona Fairgrounds. You can see there's a racetrack and display areas. This is all part of the fairgrounds for the County of Los Angeles. And the RNLHS were relegated to this area down here for the display, where they have about a dozen or so pieces of rolling stock. So you see it had to go from that point 1.3 miles across the parking lot and do kind of a dog bone return, because they wanted it facing a certain way while it was being towed to Cheyenne, meaning forward. And it would have a temporary connection, since there was obviously no track going through the parking lot. There had to be a temporary connection made with the Metrolink Union Pacific line that was at the top of your screen there in blue. We'll see how they did that later. There was talk about putting in a temporary switch, but to put in a temporary switch is in excess of $1 million. So that was out. Next, please. So they had to start taking apart the engine and cleaning all the moving parts that were going to be under stress during its time transporting from California to Wyoming. And of course, that starts by hand, and you go through the entire locomotive doing this with all the bearings and wheels. And it was quite a chore. That alone took a couple of months to complete. Now, they did disconnect and remove the pistons. Next slide, please. As you see here, as a close up right there, some of the bearing they were cleaning, and those are roller bearings that were on the rods and not friction bearings. So that was a little bit of a godsend. And also to mention that before the RNLHS gained possession of the locomotive, it went through a shopping in Wyoming, in Cheyenne. So the locomotive was in very good condition. And of course, again, the weather situation in Southern California really helped that out. And at the top there, you can see the pistons that were removed from the locomotive for transport. Next, please. We did a final night photo shoot of the big boy at the RNLHS, and it was a fundraiser donation thing. And my thing being night photography of locomotives, we rented some smoke generators to make it look like the locomotive was hot and it was ready to go. And when people started posting their photos online, everybody thought that we just threw a fire in the firebox and started it right up, and we were going to just roll right out of the museum. So that was kind of a funny thing. And of course, that wasn't the case. It hadn't been fired at this point in over 50 years. Next, please. Oh, yes, and the Union Pacific decided they wanted to use that for their calendar, so I made a little money that night. But my wife outdid me because, next slide, please, she did a painting. And she ended up selling that to a museum for way more than I got from the Union Pacific. So, but she's a very talented artist, and she does do locomotive paintings, not at my behest, but because she wanted to. A little side note there, but anyway, next slide, please. So the task of building panel track across the parking lot to get the engine out of the compound began. And that's Ed himself swinging the 9-pound hammer. Next, please. So here it is on its first jaunt out of the compound in 50-some years. And they're slowly making that curve to go that 1.3 miles across the parking lot. Now, as we're going to look at some other photos that are coming up, you're going to see guys standing around with 2x4s in their hand. What do you think that's for? That's right. The engine at this point, it did have a temporary braking system, but as always, Ed is a very careful, cautious person. And just in case something went wrong, you were instructed to block it with the 2x4. Now, I'm not going to say it. I'll wait till later. Next slide, please. So they had an official news conference where the Union Pacific announced that it had taken possession of the engine and they were moving it to Cheyenne. It was a bit of a media event. Trains Magazine was there. They were doing a live broadcast worldwide of the moving of the engine across the parking lot, so to speak. And these are Ed, of course, speaking, and those are some of the members of the steam crew at that point in time in 2013. Next, please. So here's kind of an overview of the parking lot and the hedges way back here. That's where the Metrolink train tracks are, and that's where they have to go all the way up there across that parking lot to connect. And you might think, well, okay, it's a parking lot, it's pretty flat, there's no problem getting across there. That's exactly the opposite. It's a parking lot, and it did have a kind of a dip, and it would go up. And as asphalt is, it's not like concrete where they would pour a foundation and it's very level. Asphalt it undulates a lot. So in order to get past that problem, they would block it with plywood. And that continued all the way down through the process. And it was also a leapfrog situation with the track where they used panel track. They didn't lay one track and pull it across. It was you take that panel up in back of the engine and you move it in the front and then you pull it and you take that panel, kind of like building the pyramids, if you remember how they did that. Next, please. And of course, somebody in the crew was in charge of replacing the big boy logo on the boiler every morning. So that is still a tradition that continues that we saw when it was here in Texas. Next, please. So here you have the crews putting this track together. The gentleman in the hard hat is part of the Union Pacific Bridge and Building and Track, and he came out to help. And you can see very close up at the bottom of the frame all that plywood that they're using to block the track so that it remains level, because you don't want this to happen and then the whole locomotive just kind of goes over. And also the other thing is some of this asphalt, even though it's been there for decades, it is soft when you're rolling a million pounds over it. So they needed to make sure the track was in a certain amount of degree of level. Next, please. And you can see they're standing by with their 2x4s as they're towing it with a tractor to pull it around that curve. Next, please. Gave me an opportunity for a broadside, first time in 50 years that you could do a shot like this, because all of the other equipment behind the locomotive when it was displayed, you couldn't back up far enough, so I did all this documentation. But it's kind of a nice photo of something that hadn't been seen in about 50 years in that opportunity. Next, please. So this is how they would, at this point, remove a piece of the paneling track and lift it with that forklift and take that section out and move it to the back of the engine. Next, please. And that's how they moved it. It was basically a tow line. And it had a braking system on it at this time that they had rigged an air compressor in the tender, and they would bring up the compressor to operational pressure, and somebody would be in the cab at the brakes, and when they pulled it forward, it was actually dragging on the brakes, so it wouldn't get out of control. Next, please. And there you can see the front loader with the line pulling it. And you can kind of get an idea at this point in time where the locomotive is crossing the parking lot. It's kind of in a dip. So it just came down, and now they're pulling it back up slightly uphill to the Metrolink track. Next, please. There's the whole shebang right there. So the brakes are on the locomotive, and the front loader is pulling it, and slowly, it gets closer and closer each day to the mainline track. Next, please. And here they are, they're blocking it for the evening. They've gone as far as they can go at this point. And by the way, this is, if you're paying attention to the dates, this takes place over a month. It doesn't happen quickly. It's a very, very slow process. And also you get a good look at all the cribbage that they have underneath the track to compensate for the unlevelness of the parking lot. And also, while they were in the middle of moving this thing, somebody discovered that running underneath the parking lot was a very large, like wash or something that had been covered by the parking lot, and it was a drainage wash to get the rainwater out of the park. And they weren't quite sure if the weight of the locomotive was going to affect that. Nobody said anything, and they got over it, but it was one of those little details that was somehow overlooked. But there was no catastrophe, nothing happened. Next slide, please. So right next to the fairgrounds is the Auto Club Raceway, where they have the Winter National Drag Races every year. And if you're familiar with the area as I am, well, this is at the starting line of the drag races, and it's actually heading in the right direction. So I thought it was kind of a cute photo of the big boy at the starting line of the drag races. So next slide, please. And there's a section of the panel track being rushed to the back of the engine for assembly. Next, please. There's passing the engine. Next, please.
What weight rail did they use for the panel track?
Oh, it's 132. The panel track is something that they have stationed throughout the system for obvious reasons, derailed. So they brought it in by truck because there was no other way to get it there. The money that they spent on restoring the engine is one cost, but getting it to Cheyenne was quite another. So I think if I had to guess, I think they probably spent about 10 million on the whole project, but that's just me guessing. Next, Mr. Dickens at the controls. Ed and I became friends during this time, and I'm a people photographer, shooter person, so I like to take portraits when time permits, and that's my portrait of Dick at work. Next, please. I was able to talk him into doing a group photo, and he obliged. Very happy to do it. Anybody that's had any direct contact with Dick, he does his absolute most to accommodate any requests that I've ever had, and I think he's done the same thing for a lot of other people. This just being one example. Next, please. So now we're getting very close to the Metrolink tracks. It's November 22nd, creeping up on Thanksgiving. You can see one of the commuter trains in the background, and they're going to back the engine and then swing the track that you see here. They're going to push it so that it turns out toward the track. That's how they turned the locomotive. They would leave the rail connected and just shove it in the other direction and recrib it and start to head out the door to get to the main line. Yes. Next, please. So as it getting close to Thanksgiving, the work stopped for the holiday, obviously, and people constantly throughout this entire process are here visiting and reminiscing. They're telling their stories about how they remember the big boy or what this part does. And there were just people coming every day, nonstop. Even when it wasn't running, it was an extreme people magnet. Next, please. People coming to do their family portrait for their Christmas card with the big boy. I would talk to some of these folks, and they didn't really have an idea what this was all about, but they'd heard it on the news, and they thought it was something they needed to look at and be a part of. Next, please. So here we go from the fairgrounds to West Colton, West Colton is a giant yard originally built by the Southern Pacific, and it is relatively close to San Bernardino. Next, please. And again, it is now at the top of the map at the temporary connection, and it's going to wait until April before the connection is made with the Metrolink line. Next, please. And that's the route map that we're going to follow next. Not a quick trip, but they had to go west before they can go east for the connection of the Los Angeles Division main line here on the Union Pacific. Next, please. So the night finally comes in January, and they're going to pull the engine out of the park. And this is early in the evening, and the crowds hadn't quite gathered yet. Next, please. So with the passing of the last evening commuter train, the track crew that's in the foreground here, as soon as that thing goes by, boy, they get busy, they get to work. Next, please. So of course, the first thing is that they do is they undertake the cutting of the rail. Now, this is not done without extreme calculation, because what they have to do with the mainline track is they cut it in a very strategic area, and then they move it this way to connect with the track that has been laid from the parking lot, and it has to line up perfectly. No mistakes. Next, please. So there they are. They're cutting the rail, and they're starting to move the concrete ties and the rail to the, slide it over to connect with the, we'll call it the escape track. Next, please. So there you see it. That gentleman is standing on the temporary paneling track, and they're starting to bring the mainline track into alignment with the escape track. Next, please. So they handle it just like it's a regular railroad. They level it, they ballast, they tamp it. After all, it is 1 million pounds. It's only going to last for an evening, but still, it's got to be right. It cannot be wrong. Next, please. So everybody's starting, the crowds are starting to gather. Everybody's getting all excited. We're at 12:31 a.m. right now. So next, please. This is just the people that you can see. There were probably 500 people here at 1 o'clock in the morning on, I forget what day that was. It was like a Tuesday or something. But the people were coming out to see this thing get pulled out of the park. Next, please. And being the showman that Ed is, he brought UP 1996. Now, anybody know the significance of that number? That's the year that the SP was absorbed, I'll say it, absorbed into the Union Pacific. So, next, please. So here it comes, they're making the connection. And this actually took quite a while for the air test, so on and so forth. Remember, all these systems are new. It hasn't been tried in 50 years, so there was a lot of trial and error to get it to work correctly. Next, please. And there you have it. At 2:52 a.m., January 26, 2014, locomotives back on the national system. Next, please. Now we're looking, instead of west, we're now looking east, and the track to the left would go to San Bernardino, and it has been severed, and you can see the connection, the temporary connection that goes into the park. Next, please. So in exchange for that locomotive, there was to be no money exchanged between the Union Pacific and the RNLHS. So this is what they got in exchange. They got one EMD SD40, one bay window caboose, one 60-foot plug door boxcar, and one membership fundraiser excursion trip in 2019 from West Colton to Barstow, California, and return. That a good deal? Next, please. So there's the engine that they, caboose and boxcar that they are to receive. And this is stationed at the Covina Metrolink station, which is about 6 miles from the point of where the big boy re-entered the system. And this is the first point in which there's double track, so the two will pass each other. Next, please. There's Ed watching everything from the front platform as being towed very gingerly as it makes its first stop at the Covina Metrolink station to check the bearings and check the lubrication. Next, please. Of course, the 4014 is a giant publicity machine for the Union Pacific Railroad and a machine for goodwill. So every dignitary that is a closet rail fan wants to sit up in the cab and have their picture taken with Ed. So, of course, they obliged, and Ed posed with the mayor, Mr. Walter Allen III, mayor of Covina. Next, please. So back to the scene of the crime. This is where they had cut the track originally to make that connection. There's the panel track that was a temporary escape track that they used. Next, please. And I didn't get a chance to cover that, but this is where they brought in the diesel locomotive. And this is the same spot where we saw the big boy at night being ready to be pulled out of the on the escape track. Next slide, please. So it has made its way through Bassett and is now approaching Pomona, my neighborhood. And this is the consist that pulled the locomotive to West Colton Yard. And again, Ed being the showmanship, you probably can't see it from where you're sitting, but the number of this locomotive is 4884. Nice touch, Ed. Next, please. So there it is. You can see the SP Heritage Unit going through Pomona, California. Next, please. And again, the track was just like what you saw here in Texas. Even though the locomotive is cold and it looks terrible and it's got all this cable running all around it, people were trackside by the hundreds. It was amazing to see this happen. Next, please. So it's dropped its train and in the yard, and it is going over to the storage track where they do keep the Heritage Fleet coaches. I forgot to mention in the earlier slide, the consist here was pulling a series of sand cars, and they were using that as ballast for braking, which you'll see in a couple of other slides. I'll point that out. Next slide, please. And this is where it sat until they could make arrangements to tow it to Cheyenne. And you can see there's the airline that is connected to the airline in the locomotive for the braking system. So there's a temporary braking line that goes through the locomotive to provide the braking on the locomotive. The 4014, that is. Next slide, please. So we come back to the fairgrounds, and what do they have to do? Well, they got the steam engine out, well, they got to put the diesel back in. So there, it's the same process in reverse, except they don't have to tow it because this locomotive is operational. They just use the motive power that's in the diesel to run it down the panel track. And it's the same issue. They have to block and they have to tackle, they have to correct for the unlevelness of the parking lot. Next, please. So again, to refresh your memory, that's the distance that they have to go back to the compound. Next, please. Same process, putting the panel track in front of the diesel. Next, please. And of course, there's Ed walking the diesel through. And it's important that you have a man on the ground for obvious reasons, because sometimes you could hear things on the track cracking or breaking or stretching or realigning, and he has to call a halt to the forward motion of the engine, because you can't hear that from the cab, so you have to have somebody on the ground listening and watching what the rail is doing on the asphalt. Next, please. And it kind of looks like a little garden railroad in this giant parking lot, kind of an unusual perspective. I don't know. I was leaving one day and I thought, oh my God, that looks like the Guard Railroad that they have at the Pomona Fairgrounds. Next, please. So here they're bringing in the diesel, and the mayor of Pomona this time, Elliot Rothman, he was a welder in another life, and he is cutting the ribbon with his welding torch. And they will bring the locomotive into the compound where it will stay probably forever. Next, please. And there's the crew happy to get rid of this locomotive. I mean, finishing the job. There you go. Next, please. So here we go from West Colton to Yermo, California. Next, please. This is the part where it goes through the Cajon Pass, which is, I'm sure everybody is familiar with the Cajon Pass? Okay. And this would take a period of one day. So they have to wait, just like everyone else, that there's a charter through here. They have to wait until they are given track and time, because when you schedule a charter excursion, it's like an airliner is today. You don't leave the gate until you can get into the national system and your plane could make that trip. Well, it's the same way with railroad. They schedule you time, and you have to adhere to that window of time to make your departure. Next, please. So here we are in the West Colton Yard, and they're getting ready to tow this thing to Cheyenne. Next slide, please. So they have installed, in addition to the braking system, there's a lubricating system for going around the tight track work that they're going to have to deal with getting in and out of the yard. And it's somewhat akin to the track lubricating machines that you see at the side of the, except this is onboard locomotive. And I'm not sure how this worked or who controlled it, or if it was like a slow drip. But anyway, that was one of the devices that they added to the list of things that they had to do to get this thing to Cheyenne. Next, please. So, of course, it's a big media event. Dave Bussey, the cameraman there for ABC7, he's a rail fan, and he self-assigned himself this job. And, got it, snuck in there and did an interview with Ed. And anyway, next slide. There's a overpass at West Colton Yard, where all the rail fans go. They haven't fenced it off, and you can shoot all day long and nobody bothers you. This thing was crawling with people. You could feel the bridge kind of moving like that, with people walking on it. Of course, Trains Magazine was there doing a worldwide broadcast. Next, please. So here it comes, and it was somewhat of a carnival atmosphere. They had built a platform inside the tender so that people could stand and wave at the crowds as they went by. So it was kind of reminiscent of a very long procession of a rose parade. Next, please. There you go. There they are. Ed, of course. Oh, yeah, there is Ed. There he is. And those are dignitaries from the museum, and Bob Brenza from the competition, the BNSF. I worked with Bob when I worked with the railroad, and he would schedule special trains for me. So somehow he snuck himself a spot in the tender. Next, please. And there's some of the rail fans that came out to see it with their tablets and cell phones and whatever else they had. Next, please. Here's crossing Interstate 10. I often wondered if people who were driving down the highway knew what they were looking at, or if they even paid attention to it, but probably not. Next, please. So here it starts to really bite into the Cajon Pass at Swarthout Canyon Road. And this is, at this point, we're approaching Cajon Station, which was one of the first old telegraph stations in the Cajon Pass. Next, please. And I got stuck on the road. Me and 50,000 of my best friends who were doing the same thing I was that day, and created a nightmare of a traffic jam, both on Interstate 15 and the old Route 66. Next, please. I could barely get ahead of it, but this is one of the Mormon Rocks, kind of a famous background for many rail fans over the years, starting in the 1920s and 1930s when this hobby sort of took off. Next, please. Here we're rounding the curve up at Summit, and you can see all the people waving from the tender. And again, Summit is at the top of the hill, and there's a pull-off where you can park, and it was just full of cars. It's just amazing. This thing's not even hot yet. Next, please. There you go, looping away. It's around to the Summit there, past a container train there in the background. Next, please. And the procession waves.
Did they have these sand cars for braking again on this?
Excuse me?
Did they have the sand cars for braking power on this?
Yes, yeah, they do. Next, please. Here's its first stop in Victorville, California for lubrication and engine heat check. They run around with a thermostatic gun. They can take the temperature of the bearings, make sure nothing's getting out of control. And this place is just jammed with people. It's unbelievable. Next, please. I was racing to get ahead of it, and I was ahead of it, and I saw this flag kind of tattered and beat up and nasty, but I thought it would be a good comparison with the flag on the diesel. So I had to stop and do it. Meanwhile, I'm taking this picture, all these other cars are just going one after another, about 60, 70 miles an hour. Next, please. Yermo, California, where I stopped following it, I had to go back to work, and that's where I left it on April 28th, 2014. Next, please. This is a photo that Ed sent me in 2016. This is about as far down as you can get without taking it off the wheels, which of course they did. But you can see it's completely minus the cab, and the two supports that come out there are obviously to support the cab. Some of the supports for the cab. Next, please. This is the excursion that they were promised in return for the big boy. Next, please. Early morning, October 2019, right on schedule, as they promised they would do an excursion in the spring of 2019. Well, except it's October. Next, please. There's smiling Ed there. Got to take a picture of Ed. Next, please. Also, I do a series of portraits of the crew as well, but this is my favorite of Jimmy Thompson. Just a nice work-a-day photo, and that's just one of the things I like to do. Next, please. Again, now she's hot, and now there's like 3 or 4 times as many people on the bridge taking pictures as she leaves town. Next, please. Coming up into the Cajon Pass, at the track, very few places where there weren't people standing and taking pictures. It was just nonstop people everywhere. Next, please. Now, this is Victorville Station again, and if you think it was crowded the first time it went through when it was cold, multiply that number by about 4. The whole town of Victorville experienced a mass traffic jam. So it was difficult to get there, difficult to get out. Next, please. Now we're approaching Barstow, the end of the excursion, and you can see the consist in this shot with the multiple dome line cars that were in. So the base price of this excursion was $400 for the cheap seats, and if you wanted to ride in a dome, $2,500. Sold out. Just saying. Okay, next, please. Oh, sorry. Mr. Dickens. I can't resist a shot like that of Mr. Dickens. Next, please. Of course, this is as far as I could do it that evening, and it was set for return to West Colton this evening on the October 12th, 2019. Next, please. So I chose a spot to set up to shoot it in a nice morning sun, and I met this busload of Japanese tourists, and they had created this trip for themselves. They flew all the way from Japan, rented a car and a driver, and they chased the train. They were pretty much everywhere that I went, so they had really done their homework as to where to go to find the best places to shoot, but I thought it would be kind of fun. I got an email of one of these guys, and I sent him the photo, and he's very grateful. Next, please. So that was a shot we were all waiting for. Beautiful morning sunlit side shot of the engine coming into Yermo, California, or Daggett, I should say. Next, please. This is in Barstow on its return trip. Not as many people in Barstow, but still for, being 10 o'clock in the morning, that's not a bad turnout.
Is there still a Y up at the summit then, that they turned the engine on?
At Summit, no, there's no Y. That Y's been gone since the 50s.
No, okay.
Yeah.
How'd they turn the engine to go back then?
Oh, there's one in Urimo. Yeah, the Union Pacific shares trackage with the BNSF through the Cajon Pass. Once it gets to Daggett, the lines separate, and once they get to Urimo, which is their first terminal east, they can do whatever they want. So they take their time there, and there is a wide track to turn around, and a big marine logistics base. So, next, please. Descending Cajon Pass, that's the summit and back of it. Next, please. Something I haven't showed you yet, and that's the rear end of the train. And there's a couple of, you can see the dome cars there. Now, to ride in that end car there, I think that was just for dignitaries. You couldn't buy a ticket for that one. So I think all the Union Pacific folks were riding in that train, in that car, excuse me. Go ahead, please. Next. Ties up again here at West Colton. And when everybody goes home and the party's over, I stick around because you get the best light when everybody goes home and the sun is coming down and there's nobody to bother you. So I wait 3 or 4 hours and I can get shots like this. Next, please. So it was leaving California and making a trip to the Southwest. And I thought it would be an interesting comparison, wind power versus steam power. So these are the windmills that are out by Palm Springs, California. And I thought that would make kind of an interesting technology shot. Next, please. Okay, now we're coming into an area, the last part of our journey, you're all more familiar with. Next slide, please. So I don't know anything about Texas as far as railroads are concerned. I'm a newbie, in case you don't know that. So I want to acknowledge here that all of these photos I owe to Ken Fitzgerald, because I just tagged along with him. He was gracious enough to let me ride along with him. And that man knows everything. So he picked out all these wonderful spots for me to make pictures, and this is one of them. And I thought I'd just try to do something to emphasize the flags. So I just made the photo monochrome except for the flags, and I kind of like it that way. Next, please. And there's this very famous photo by, I think it's Karsh. It's a portrait of a locomotive engineer in the about 1910, 1920 at New York. And he's got this very nice side profile, and he's got his hand on the throttle, and it looks very businesslike. Well, Ed, without knowing it, kind of imitated that exact same pose, and he's got this very stern, businesslike approach. But the pilot in the background is like, "Hey, how you doing, man? Yeah, having a good time." And no, go ahead.
On the numbers below 4014, what is the 24, 24 over 32?
Oh man,
It was 23 and 3/4 previously.
yeah, that I asked Ed about that, but without pen and paper, it goes in one ear and out the other. But you can find that easily on the internet. There's an explanation. It was changed. Okay, the D, I can tell you, after 540, the D stands for Dickens, because he redesigned the firebox, and that is a designation of that change in design. That's the only thing I can tell you. And I don't want to guess or speculate at the other stuff, but that I can definitely tell you. That's the only thing that stuck. Next, please. So anybody recognize this group of guys? Huh? Yeah, maybe. Well, at least he's on this building right here. That guy gets around, let me tell you. So this was at the display that was at the TMP station in October. Our group volunteered to handle the crowd there, I guess is the way you call it. Next, please. And again, I wanted to bookend the earlier group photo with this group photo, and I had emailed Ed months in advance. He never returned my email, so I figured, okay, that's not going to happen. So when I saw him at Fort Worth, he says, "Where's your camera?" I go, "It's right here." He said, "Well, let's go do that group shot." I said, "Oh, we're going to do this now?" He said, "Yeah, right now. So without returning, but he remembered it, you see. And that's, I mean, somebody who remembers that kind of detail months later makes it happen. I got a lot of respect for a guy like that. Anyway, he got my group shot, and I was very happy. Another picture I sold to the Union Pacific. Anyway, that's another story. Next slide, please. Along with Ken, he took me to this place, Chester Boyer Road in Fort Worth, an open field that had a lot of space. And there's this bicycle group that one of their members, it was his birthday, and this is the trip that he wanted to take to go see the big boy. So I said, "Well, would you stand here when the train goes by? You all take a picture. I'll take a picture of you with the big boy." So I thought kind of a nice little public interest photo. And not only rail fans came out to see the big boy, it was the public in general. So I thought that was kind of a neat shot. Next, please. And there's Ken with his drone. And as you know, Ken does work for all the railroads in Fort Worth. And he is a licensed pilot to fly his drone, and is very cautious and takes a lot of care in shooting it and what he does. And I'm very grateful for him taking me around Texas. Next, please. So there's my two photos. Almost 10 years apart. There's been some personnel changes. I prefer the orange to the green, but that's just me. But that was what I was trying to achieve in asking Ed for a group photo. Next, please. I think we're done. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, sir.
When it's in active duty in the early days, what was the range for a load of coal and water? How often did they?
About 100 miles, give or take. That's where you saw that coaling station on the main line. So, and that depends on whether they're going uphill or whether they're going downhill, what the terrain is. And I'm generally reserving my comments to the big boy.
And then how did they handle it on the tour, like when they came in?
Oh, okay, well.
How did they handle loading?
Well, that's one of the reasons they converted the locomotive from coal to oil. It's more efficient, number one. Yeah, and it's much easier to bring oil to a remote site with a truck than it is with coal. You have to conveyor it up, you have to dump it, conveyor it up, and it's a nightmare. So that was one of the reasons that they needed to convert it to oil, for the ease of refueling. Now, as far as water is concerned, they usually team up with a local fire department. They provide the pumping into the tender. Yes, sir.
The main reason they used oil is the 3985 was originally coal-fired, and it set fires all along the track.
Oh, well, yeah, there's the other obvious reason is the fire hazard with the clinkers and all that falling through the grates.
Once diesels arrived, there were no weed burners.
Yeah, that's true. Did you have a question, Mike?
Yeah, curious, I even hesitate to ask. So many engines that are put on display get vandalized. Builder's plate,
Yeah.
steam. How was there any vandalism of the engine before it was?
Well, when I say compound at the Pomona Fair, it was a fenced-in area. They had two areas of display. One was much closer to the fairgrounds itself, and in 1991 they moved it over to this other area that was kind of out of the way, and not a lot of people paid attention to it. And it had a fence around it. So it was well maintained, and they had a crew of people that were docents at the museum that would take care of the engine. And that's another reason why the 4014 was a better candidate for restoration, because they took the effort of removing the sheet metal from the boiler. And if you don't know anything about steam engines, is you have the boiler itself, the boiler shell, and then there's insulation, and then there's sheet metal. What happens over time is when it rains and it snows or it freezes, the water gets in between the sheet metal and the insulation, and it accumulates and it rusts the shell of the boiler, because they had taken the sheet metal off and the insulation off because the county in Los Angeles required them to do a remediation because of the insulation was asbestos. So they had to get rid of that stuff in order to display it to the public, especially on county grounds. So in a way, that saved the engine from being unfit for restoration. Anything else? All right, thank you. Oh, one more.
This doesn't have to do with the move in California there, but, you know, when the engine was built and moved halfway across the country, do you have any information on, like, what effort was taken to make sure the bridges would work and the clearances were right? It must have been
Well, see, I think that would have been the responsibility of the shipper. They had all that information. And perhaps there was a more circuitous route for it to get to a Union Pacific connection. But I understand they operated hot out of the factory to Union Pacific rails. I don't have any pictures of that, but, you know, pray tell. I do have a book at home, it's really great, called Big Boy 4014, obviously, and it's by William Crateville, who wrote this book, everything you want to know about any of these big boy engines, you know, down to the last nut and bolt. I use a lot of that information for this. Yes, sir.
Speaking to one of the UP execs at one of these, I think it was the time the engine was here before, was that 4 years ago? They told me that months ahead of time, they will travel the entire route. They look at all the clearances, they look at all the bridges, they look at the track work. Everything's almost planned to the inch, and they know exactly what track will need repair before you put something that heavy on it.
Yeah, they have all that. They have all that information available to them, obviously. One of the things to piggyback on that is a few years ago, I was working on a project with the BNSF where they were going to live map, what they called it, the entire railroad. In other words, do a video of the entire railroad. They could pull up and look at anything they wanted to visually on a monitor. I don't know where that process is now. I worked on it for 3 or 4 days, and that was the end of it. And I'm sure they've accomplished it by now. But when we go out and take pictures for the railroad, I have on my camera, wherever I left it, a GPS, and I'm required as part of my work to provide the railroad with a GPS number so they know exactly where that photo was taken, because, you know, it's not enough for it to be a good, sharp, beautiful picture. They want to know where it was.
Okay, any more questions for Steve? Hey, Steve, thank you very much. A great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, that wraps up the meeting for today. Don't forget, we got another one coming up in February. Thank you all. Hey, David, do we need to pick up the chairs?